It is 10 o'clock. I think we will go ahead and get going. I am Barbara with Home Probe. Welcome everybody to the second of our virtual inspection series webinars. Today is the exterior. For those of you that have not met Rael, he was an inspector with us for a long time, a contractor before that, and his brain is filled with amazing information that he will share with you. If you have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and at the end, he will be happy to answer them. And I hope you all learn a lot and enjoy.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and we'll go right into the exterior webinar. We'll run through the webinar, take about 25-30 minutes to do so, depending on how quickly I speak. And then please do, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I will actually ask for questions once we actually do get through with a little webinar here. So as an inspector, you know, when you pull up in front of the house, we look at the first thing is what does the lot grading look like? And the lot grading is actually really important, simply because the water flow on the lot, if it's moving away from the home, then the home is better protected than if the water is running towards the home, obviously. And, you know, there were various types of foundation materials through the years. Back in the 30s and 40s, perhaps the home was actually built on, for lack of a better word, stilts or columns made out of brick, and it was open underneath. And then we started with actual crawl spaces and foundations, and they had brick or cement block, which was the standard material that was used for a foundation. And so they would have to dig the footers, and then it would come out of the ground with the actual foundation material. In more recent times, in the last 20-odd years or so, perhaps a little longer, poured concrete foundation is the way folks are going. So just to kind of give you an idea, both brick and cement block or masonry block are not obviously totally waterproof or water resistant. They are permeable. So water does actually seep its way through the actual material into the basement of crawl space. And what happens then, of course, is being that it's warm and it's dark and there's moisture, that is a wonderful opportunity for mold growth. And that's like the word that's the killer of a lot of deals is when we deal with mold. And we actually do have a webinar dealing with crawl spaces and mold, etc. So be sure to check your calendars for that webinar as well. So the whole idea, of course, is if there's no water around the outside of the home, then no water will get into the interior. And when we're speaking about interior, we're specifically speaking about the crawl space or the basement area. So if we have a home perhaps that's on a downslope away from the street, which sort of you can see from the schematic that the home is sitting down below where the water is going to be running to, and we create what's called a swale. And you can see the way the arrows are. We want to divert the grading and the dirt around the home. You can see the home is slightly elevated on that little piece of dirt right there, and then again it's sloped away. So we want to get that water running around the home, and there are a couple of different ways of doing that. I mean, when the homes are built these days, even with a poured concrete foundation, they're usually going to have some kind of a drainage system around that foundation from the high point to the low point to get any kind of moisture that's traveling down that lot away from the home. So it could involve trenching out the area and putting in some gravel and a pipe. And then backfilling it so that any water that does actually run up around the home can actually be drained on out. So the recommended slopes here in the front of the home where you have a concrete driveway, 1 inch and 4 foot drop would be a minimum slope to get that water away. On the side here, 1 foot, 1 inch in every 12 feet. So that's kind of where you want to get that water coming away from the home. And this is really important on the side of the house like this, the 1 inch and 12, is simply because the lots now are shrinking in size. So your neighbor could literally be 10 feet away from you. And then if they have the same type of slope, there's usually going to be a gully in the middle, and the water will just sort of sit there. Many homes these days are on an actual concrete slab. Not too many are being built on crawl spaces anymore because there's really no reason for it. The original crawl space actually came into place when heating and furnaces were first involved in heating the home. Way back in the day, there used to be a wood burning stove to provide the heat in the log cabins, and it was a dirt floor, et cetera, But for the most part now, there's no need for a furnace to be in a crawl space anymore. If there's a basement, then that's one location. Sometimes it's in the garage, and sometimes it's even in the attic, pumping the air all the way down to the second floor and down to the first floor or ground floor. So there were different reasons why we don't need crawl spaces anymore. Certainly, it's a great boon for us as inspectors not to have to go in there anymore, and that's great. So here we're showing, basically getting the water away from the home. So the gutters are also an important factor here. So, when we can see in the picture how the water is we call it ponding, is actually backed up in this gutter here. And you can see all the debris that's in there. So, what it comes down to really is, like with all homes and our cars and our bodies, we need to have maintenance. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of our homes. And here's a good thing for any homeowner, is to constantly make sure that the gutters, aren't full of debris. Basically, what happens here then is when the debris, the leaves, the trash that's blowing around in the air land up in the gutter, and then it rains and it clogs it up. And then what happens there is that there's so much weight in the actual gutter that the gutter spikes that you can see right here, and we'll show some more in just a moment, they actually pull the gutter away from the home. What that does then is when the water comes down the shingle right here, it drops in onto the fascia board and rottens out the fascia board. Or else the water just piles up into the gutter here and then overflows on the gutter and hits the ground right next to the foundation, allowing it to enter into the foundation. As we just mentioned, that would cause an issue with the mold and mildew in the crawl space or in the basement area. So even, with the gutters being installed correctly, you can see what happens here is just a minor thing where the actual shingles are installed. And in this particular schematic here where the X is, we see that the shingle was installed and it was overlapping the fascia board by a good distance. And the result there is that the water is shooting down on the actual shingle and jumping the gutter itself and overshooting down and hitting the ground there. Same result as we're getting the water right next to the foundation, which we want to avoid. So here's the proper installation, the way it should be done. We're going to inch in 200 feet in a gutter slope. You're going to have a 6-foot minimum extension of the downspout. And that's the most important factor here. A lot of folks just, instead of using the metal gutter extension here, they could use a flexible pipe that's available for a few dollars from the Home Fix-It store. They're also going to be secured every 2 to 3 feet. In this particular case, as we saw also in the previous picture, it's a spike and a ferrule. The ferrule is that little metal tube that hides the spike. The spike is driven in to the fascia board right where the rafter should be to give it extra support. So that's the perfect way to install the gutters, and they're securing. So here we are. We're looking at, here we have a masonry block foundation, and the masonry block foundation. You can see here where the green mold and mildew has started to form here. You can see the moisture on the ground here. This is a splash block, but if you look at the slope of the house, it actually comes towards the home here from the back. And so they've put in these little vinyl pieces to try to hold back some of the water. And what's happening here is the gutter is dumping out all the water into the splash block, and then it's flowing over the back of the splash block, still going into the foundation. So we can see here that perhaps it would be recommended by a waterproofing company that, okay, we're going to go ahead and trench out here, and we're going to put in a drainage system and $10,000 and up. Literally for 20 bucks, you could have some downspout extensions put on, save a ton of money. I had an incident right here at my own home a couple of years ago, where after 26 years, I had some moisture intrusion into my basement. I had a poured concrete foundation, and I located a small crack in the actual foundation, which I had sealed up, and that took care of the problem. So it doesn't always have to be a 10,000 plus inspection. By the way, I did have 3 or 4 companies come out, and the bill was going to be between $15,000 and $25,000, which would be including, of course, removing sheetrock on the interior of the basement and trenching out and drainage. I mean, the whole thing. And until somebody with half a brain came along and said, you know what, we can just take care of this from the outside, and we can eliminate the problem, which they did. So basically, water taken away from the house will not be able to enter into the house, which eliminates a ton of problems. So even something simple like a planter or garden, against the outside wall is something that we would look at as inspectors. And you can see here where you've got the dirt from the planter outside of the house. This house has a brick veneer. The wall framing is there, and of course here we have the floor framing, and we're showing an area of rot right here. You can see how far below the actual soil in the planter is. So what actually happens is where you have these little weep holes, we have little tubes that go from this open space right here behind the brick to the exterior. They're called weep holes for any moisture that might be getting into this gap right here. And it should flow to the exterior once the soil is over the top of those little weep holes and tubes. It actually has a reverse situation happening, and the moisture is coming into the structure instead of out and away from the structure. And that's causing the rot that's happening right here. So this gives you an idea of what actually the weep hole looks like. You can see the little tubes right here. It's about the size of your pinky. A little clear tube that comes in there every couple of feet. You can see them right here along the way, which allows the moisture to drain out. And this is what you have. You've got high pressure on the outside where the rain comes up against the brick. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's really not a total waterproof structure. It is permeable to an extent. So you do have the moisture traveling through. And you can see the drips coming through on the inside of this wall. Now there's a gap here between the actual outside brick and the sheathing and the sheathing paper that's on the structure that's on the inside of the framework here. Today we look at it not so much as sheathing paper, but rather a house wrap, which is more like a polyethylene, like a plastic type of barrier. I'm sure you all have seen it on a new construction home where it's the whole house wrap has been wrapped around the house, which makes it, moisture resistant. So you got that air gap in there, and then we come on down here, and then we have that weep hole down near the bottom is where that moisture needs to come back out. So, basically the weep holes allow the air into the cavity, it equalizes the pressure and allows the water to drain out. And that's really important. So if you look at this particular planter right here, it's on the outside, and you can see the brick actually goes all the way down below here. Here's our downspout. But the actual wicks are located 3 inches below the planter level. So you can see like 3 inches would be sort of here or here. And then what actually happens is rot. And this is 3 months after the purchase that the buyer actually found the rot. And the rim joists and the floor joists and sill plate were all rotted away. And it was a $36,000 repair bill there. And you can see right up above here how it's new construction. You got yellow plywood and rafters and things right here. So that was certainly an issue right here. Good thing that it was found, and this one was in a crawl space. Okay, retaining walls, they're also important. Again, for controlling the water that's approaching the home. They should have a lean towards the high side. So the higher the wall goes, the further the lean needs to go back into the soil. If it's already leaning away, then that's an indication of movement. And once it starts moving, it doesn't stop. And repairs can be costly. So we're looking at sort of a cantilevered concrete retaining wall, which is the way they're done today. Sometimes they have stacked masonry block in a yard, which is another way of doing it. But this is the way they do it with a poured concrete unit, where you can see the poured concrete right out front, and there's some rebar that's installed here for extra support at the point where the horizontal goes vertical. You can see our weep hole right here. They've got a lot of gravel behind the wall, so the water can come down from the soil into the gravel area and then go down into the weep hole and out. And that's the way it should be done. Here we're looking at it before the dirt is actually poured back in. You can see this is called a dead man. So the extensions are in the back again to give it extra support to the standing wall. You can see in the front of it, there's a masonry finish to the front of it, so you're not going to see the concrete. But you can see right here and another one right there are the weep holes. These are actually nice large ones. They're 4-inch round pipes that would go through to the front and to the exterior of that wall. So here we're looking at, again, the weep holes on the exterior of a concrete poured wall. Here's our weep hole, a drainage hole, and there's our gravel. So the whole idea is all the moisture that's coming down the soil goes into the gravel area and then makes its way to the exterior. This is one of the retaining walls that's actually leaning and moving pretty much. And this one was over in DeKalb County here in Atlanta, for those folks who are not here, but it might be similar in your area. Apparently, you know, the county is responsible for this sort of thing to be repaired. It doesn't necessarily have to fall onto the seller and the buyer. Contact your city government or county government right there, because as you know, there is a setback, which is city property or county property that goes back. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 feet, sometimes a little more, depending on what the restrictions are in the area. And the county has both the wherewithal and the knowledge on how to repair this. So you could perhaps save your deal by having this information available. So if you did happen to see this while showing the property, you could contact the county or the city and find out how to handle this particular situation. Okay, so then let's run into the different types of siding. We'll jump right into the one that's common that folks kind of get a little bit upset about, is when you deal with a home that has asbestos siding on it. So, what you should know is it can add to the cost of renovation. The material is very brittle. Spot replacement, because it's being brittle, is very difficult. And the whole idea is that if you can identify that material at the inspection, it can jeopardize the sale. So, we've seen this, but, again, when you're dealing with an inspector, our guys know how to, give the message. And the message doesn't just have to be, oh my goodness, it's asbestos siding and that's the deal and that's the killer. And we don't do that, because there are ways to handle things in a report like asbestos and other products that may be a source of concern or cost. When it comes to asbestos, let's look at it here. So it's a cement siding that has asbestos fibers in it to hold the whole process together. And they have little holes in them, and that's where they're nailed right up in. You can see these little holes here. And the way you can identify it is that it has the scalloped edge to it. Okay. Now the whole idea is, in order not to be concerned and have hazmat and all those people involved, is you don't want to start yanking the stuff off the side of the house, because once you do that, and it is as brittle as it is, the fibers are going to be released into the air, and that's what is the cancer causing agent. So what we could report is, yes, you've got asbestos siding, but it can be encapsulated. Just think about what's behind the actual siding. What you have behind the actual siding is a gypsum board or a plywood or even a wood backing to it. You have tar paper or a plastic barrier behind that. Then you have the actual studs themselves. Then you've got perhaps insulation, and then you've got either plaster or drywall on the inside walls here. So as you can see by my explanation, there are several layers of protection between the back of the siding and the interior of the home where it's likely to be breathed in. So by encapsulation, basically you come right over the outside of this asbestos siding and attach some, 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch plywood or oriented strand board right over the top of it, screw it on, nail it on, and then go ahead and put on whatever siding that you wish over that. Could be vinyl, could be fiber cement, whatever it would be. And that would be the way to handle this instead of dealing with the hazmat, which becomes extremely expensive. You got the guys in the suits, you got to have it in special bags, it's got to go to a special place. So sometimes, to dump. So in most cases, it's a lot less expensive just to go ahead and put new siding over the old stuff, and it's encapsulated right there, no longer a hazard. Brick and stone. So again, with our construction here in the United States, for the most part, what we're going to find is masonry veneer. It's not a solid masonry structural wall when we're dealing with newer construction with a brick veneer. And you can see here, we have a masonry tie. It's a metal bendable little tie that's actually nailed to the stud, and then it's put into the mortar course that goes right here as you run across. So there's, again, an air gap in the back. Here is our sheathing paper or our house wrap, and there comes our brick veneer, and that's what it looks like on the left. That's what it looks like when it's completed. Okay, so if we see the home is actually has a brick veneer, it's typical to have some cracks. So when we see the cracks, let's, you as the agent showing it, if you're looking at the home and you see multiple cracks, and if they're excessive, perhaps you should think about if there are large cracks bigger than a 1/4 inch, or if you can see that they've been repaired multiple times before you actually call in for a home inspection. Maybe it's a good idea to have a structural engineer have a look at it. So, or you can just take some photos, email or text us, take some photos and let us have a look at it on a picture, and we can advise you before you advise your client to get that inspection done. Because if it is a big issue, it may jeopardize the sale. So let's look at a couple of these little issues here. We see ourselves a horizontal cracks. When you see these patches that have been done more than once, that's kind of let's have another look at this thing over here, right above the windows. And usually what you're going to find, like in this one on the right-hand side, you can see that there's some fill-in being done on the mortar very nicely here, but there's also been some on this wall right here. Usually you're going to find that where the downspout is on the corner of the home. If you have a horizontal crack, or if you have a stair-step crack on the one side of that wall, there's usually going to be a reciprocal crack on the other side of the wall at 90 degrees. So that's what we're looking at here. Again, this is typical around a downspout or a corner area where water is constantly getting in down, right here in the corner where the slope is near the foundation. It's causing it to settle some, and it can be repaired. So this is what the stair-step crack looks like. So in this particular case, it hasn't been repaired before. Perhaps just coming and pointing it on up for now and making sure that the water is actually getting away from the home would be an easy repair. Another little picture closer up here of that stair-step cracks. Okay, so this is what it would say under the observation and recommendations in the report. Numerous cracks in the brick veneer around the home, evidence showing that these cracks have been repaired at least one time previously, and cracks have increased since the repair was completed. There's differential movement between some of the bricks, indication of lateral movement as well as vertical movement. Appears to be an ongoing issue, need to be evaluated by a qualified masonry contractor and possibly a structural engineer. So that's how to be reported if we came to the inspection first. Okay, next up, stucco. Is it the good stucco or the bad stucco? That's where it was 10 years ago was the question. Is it the good or the bad? The fact is that they're both products that have been out there for a good long while. As an inspector coming up to a home and look at the house, and you could tell without tapping on it or looking for other clues. If it had a lot of cracks in it, then it was the hardcoat stucco. But they all suffer from installation-related issues. When I built my home, I actually went for the EIFS, or the so-called bad stucco, and it's an amazing product. I've been really happy with it for all the years. Everything comes down to the installation. Okay, So we're going to report, are there significant or excessive cracks, numerous cracks? Is it installed below grade? Do we have the kick-out flashings, which is really important? Evidence of moisture anywhere and deteriorated caulking. And for both of those products, the caulking and the flashings and the maintenance is the biggest issue with the product. Okay, so even you can see here, you can see the crack here, it's been repaired. But whatever you do on a cement-based or the hard coat stucco, you are still going to be able to see where those cracks were. Unfortunately, there's no way to hide those. Look at the process on a 3-coat hard coat stucco. You can see here we've got our sheathing, and then we've got our building paper or that plastic wrap. You got a metal lath, okay, metal like chicken wire, metal lath, and then you put on the first coat, which is called a scratch coat. Then you have the second coat called the brown coat, and then there's the finish coat. And the most important thing here, besides not being in the ground, is that bottom drip screed to stop the water from wicking its way back up behind the actual bottom of the actual stucco itself. And the same applies to the synthetic stucco. You can see right here where here we have the insulation, which is a whole lot thicker than what we had back here. So that's why I'm so happy with it, because I'm able to have it well insulated and it's easy to take care of. And in this case, instead of a metal lath, we've got a little, a little plastic glass fiber type mesh there, and it's only 2 coats, a base coat and a finish coat, and it's actually held together with a fastener. Again, installation, most important issue here. All right, and then, we talked about the missing flashings. Whenever there's got a 2-story home, there's siding of some kind, brick, stone, or stucco, and we want to have that flashing behind the wall, and then 90-degree curve right here at the bottom to get whatever water flow is coming down the roof to go into the gutter. We can see right here is exactly what I'm talking about, where there is actually some behind. You can see the line here where there is flashing behind the wall, but there's no kick-out flashing right here at the bottom. So what happens is the water runs down here and makes its way in right here into the wall and then above the structure of the window, and it rots out from below. Metal and vinyl siding. 2 of the items here. This is back in the 40s. It had steel siding that had patterns on it, aluminum siding, and vinyl. And all different. The aluminum siding, whenever you played baseball or tennis or something, and you dinged it and there was a bend in it, you couldn't get it back out. So you had a ding in it from that time on. Vinyl held up a lot better. And also it was a solid color material, so any kind of scratching didn't reveal the color below. The importance there also about the vinyl is that it shouldn't be nailed and aluminum, you shouldn't nail it too tight to the actual structure, because with expansion and contraction, it needs to be able to move. So you'd leave a little bit of a gap there between the back of the nail to allow you can see that the actual opening is not a round hole for the nail, but actually an oblong, so that the actual siding can move. Somebody ought to do a little bit of cleaning up on this with a pressure wash before you put it on the market. But here you can see where the siding was installed too tightly, and so with the sun going down on it, it expanded and it started to bulge. Then we get to hardboard siding. So hardboard siding was around from about 1990 to 1996. It was involved in a litigation, a class action lawsuit. It's way past its time now, so there's no remuneration for that. But again, it came down to maintenance, and folks didn't maintain the siding. So what we had here was the deterioration, the delamination of the actual. It was pieces of wood and wood chips and glue that was originally manufactured as a recyclable product. But the edges are not painted or caulked. It deteriorated and it literally fell apart. So you can see kind of here, and there's a ton of it still out there, folks. With any of the houses built in the 90s, there are plenty of houses out there that still have hardboard siding on it. And depending on how well it was maintained is depending on how much would have to be replaced, or just the fact is that in our report, it would mention, constant maintenance is needed. You can see here where it's rotted, even though the actual face of it doesn't look deteriorated, it actually is. And in this particular case, what we can do or can be done is pull out the rotted stuff and replace it with hardy plank or hardboard or cement-based siding to be slipped up. They're making the hardboard siding, the hardy plank siding with a similar grain. And even though you'd have to probably paint that side of the house where the repairs have been done, it is actually, it can be done. I also want to keep it away from being too close to grade. You can see right here where the wood siding is in the dirt here, and so it rots away, and or the critters start chewing on it. Certainly a great attraction for termites right there. As far as decks go, it's really important to have the bolts going all the way through to into the structure. We need lag bolts with washers on them along that ledger board. But the most important thing right here is that the flashing right here extends over the ledger board and goes up behind the siding. That's going to protect the bolts, because even though the bolts are metal, they will actually rust out over time. And if you've got a party going on and lots of weight on there, it can shear off right here at the connection to the home. Wood to soil contact as well is important. Pressure treated lumber today is not what it was 30, 40 years ago. Those chemicals that were draining off of an Atlanta area and getting into the Chattahoochee River and floating down the river caused a lot of fish to die in the river, and people down south of Atlanta like their fish in the water rather than floating on top of it. So here we can look at a deck that actually collapsed due to lack of flashing, and you can see right here the damage that goes on behind the wall. So you can't see a lot of the stuff that's going on. You can see here we had some vinyl siding, and so the vinyl siding was hiding all of the destruction that was taking place behind this wall, and it would have cost a couple of $100 to have had some flashing installed up here right above the ledger board. So there we are. That's covered our webinar on the exterior. And so we're going to go to see about, let's see about in the chat to see if we can have any questions. And if I'm done with these two questions, you can, put some more in there. So sometimes the weep holes get mud in them, and inspectors say, cleaned out. Okay, so, that's interesting. Perhaps you could get an air pressure machine, something that you would inflate a car tire with, and use a high pressure hose to go in there and with air and blow that in. That's one method of doing it. Another method would be just, it's old school, but we take a coat hanger and kind of, it's tedious, I know, but you could take a coat hanger and kind of poke it through in there. And then just instead of flooding the whole area, just perhaps put a little bit of water in from time to flush it on out. I see bulging siding on new construction. What can be done? Well, Ann, I'm not sure what kind of siding that you're referring to. If it's vinyl, it could probably take some of that off a little bit and cut it just a little bit. Vinyl siding actually has an overlap to it, so there's plenty of room there for it to be, repaired. So that can be done as well. That seemed okay. What is the name of the bad stucco? It's EIFS, exterior insulation, something or other, EIFS siding. And kind siding melt in the heat? Absolutely. Neil, the issue that of somebody getting too close to the siding with a gas barbecue grill is pretty common. Funny enough, there was actually a home that we inspected that had some melting of the siding, and it was kind of a challenge to figure out what had happened there. And it just so happened that it was at the time of the day where the actual sun was up at just the right point in the sky. What it was doing, it was shining directly onto a window on the house next door, and then it was reflecting directly onto the home that we were inspecting. And being that the house was only 10 feet away, closer home, so newer construction, it was actually the sun that was causing the siding to melt. But that's only for vinyl siding. Anything else like, cement-based siding, it's not going to affect it. I think that's about it.
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you, Rael. Thank you for everybody participating. Want to let you know next week's webinar is on the roof. We look forward to seeing you. I'll send out the link the day before. And what I will also do, these webinars are just free and it's no CE credit, but next Wednesday, the 19th, Rael is also teaching a GREC accredited CE called Anatomy of a House. So it digs deep into all these areas of the home. That is 3 hours, that is CE credit. So this afternoon, I will send you all this video as well as a code where you can sign up for the Anatomy of a House for next Wednesday, coupon code, so it will be no cost. And thank you for your time. Thanks, Rael, and we'll catch up with all of you next Thursday at 10.
Thanks, Barbara. Bye.
All right, take care.